San Antonio Cave Incident. In June 1985, 3 kids from San Antonio, Texas, decided to chase an adventure. Eddie was 11, Marco was 10, and Luke was 9. That summer, kids everywhere were mesmerized by a movie about children finding treasure in underground tunnels. For these 3 friends, the movie was just the beginning. On a humid afternoon, Eddie spotted a dark slit in the limestone. Cool air flowed from the opening. It was their first real cave. For kids who had just watched a treasure hunting movie, this felt like destiny. They didn't tell anyone where they were going. They had no maps, no ropes, no helmets, just 2 flashlights and a small bag of snacks. As they entered, the temperature dropped instantly. At first, the cave seemed safe, but as they went deeper, passages branched off in different directions. They didn't know how to navigate underground or mark their route. At one point, Marco got stuck in a tight crawl space. The tunnel pinched around his chest. Panic erupted as the others pulled and pushed until he slid forward. The fun had evaporated completely. They tried to get out but couldn't find the way back. In limited light, everything looked the same. They wandered through passages but only found more confusion. Their lights were failing and they were getting tired, thirsty, and scared. By evening, they sat shivering in the dark. The first signs of hypothermia appeared. Above ground, parents realized their children were missing. By midnight, a full search was underway. Parents learned the boys had talked about finding treasure like in The Goonies. They understood their children might be trapped underground. At dawn, searchers found the cave entrance. Rescue teams arrived with proper equipment. The passages were narrow, requiring crawling. For the kids underground, the wait was terrifying. They huddled together for warmth, severely hypothermic. 32 hours after they entered, a rescuer heard crying. The team found the 3 boys, and their flashlights were dead and their skin was cold. They were alive, but just barely. Blankets wrapped around them immediately. One by one, they were guided out slowly. When they emerged, the crowd broke into tears. All 3 were treated for hypothermia and dehydration. Crookston Cave Incident. On the 8th of January 1995, Clinton Farrell woke up on a clear Sunday morning in Tennessee. He was 25 years old. Clinton and his friend had heard rumors about Civil War artifacts hidden in Crookston Cave. They decided to explore and search for treasures. Neither were experienced cavers. They wore street clothes and cowboy boots with no helmets or proper lighting. Their only light sources were basic flashlights from a hardware store. The 2 descended into the cave with confidence but no experience. As they went deeper, the passage narrowed and curved upward. Clinton squeezed through a particularly tight section. The passage forced him to contort his body awkwardly. Above him, a massive 500-pound boulder had been gradually loosening for decades. As Clinton moved through the space, his movement created vibration. The boulder shifted with a grinding sound. It pinned Clinton's head against the cave wall with crushing force. He was trapped and unable to move. Clinton's friend saw the horrifying sight. He made the brave decision to leave and get help. He navigated back through the cave in near darkness to call emergency services. Rescue teams from Sequatchie and Hamilton County responded. They faced a nightmare scenario. Clinton was trapped 200 feet inside with a 500-pound boulder pinning his head. The area was geologically unstable. Underground, Clinton fought to remain conscious. The crushing pressure caused waves of pain. His bent body restricted his breathing, and hypothermia threatened. The rescue team worked with surgical precision. They installed supports around the unstable rock. They used a come-along device with cables and pulleys to move the boulder. The process was agonizingly slow. After nearly 5 hours, the boulder moved enough to free Clinton's head. The team carefully secured him in a specialized cave litter. They navigated narrow passages carrying their injured patient. Once outside, they faced a 100-foot slope to reach the waiting helicopter. After nearly 6 hours trapped underground, Clinton was finally heading to a hospital. Doctors found severe head trauma but were cautiously optimistic. Clinton's recovery took months of rehabilitation, but he survived. Rattling Cave Incident. On the 24th of February 2001, 2 experienced cave explorers arrived at Rattling Cave in Tennessee. Ray Pritchett was 34 years old, and her companion was Michael Green. Rattling Cave had a vertical drop of 133 feet straight down. They began rigging ropes to anchor points at the top. Green volunteered to descend first. He attached his rappel device and began his descent. Green reached the bottom safely and waited. At the top, Pritchett prepared for her rappel. She used a rappel rack attached to her harness with a single auto-locking carabiner. The carabiner had a plastic locking sleeve to prevent the gate from opening. Pritchett checked her setup and began her descent. But something was wrong. The carabiner and rack may have been oriented incorrectly. As Pritchett descended, forces on her equipment shifted. Without warning, the plastic locking sleeve broke. The gate sprang open. Pritchett's rappel device detached completely from her harness. She suddenly found herself in free fall. She plummeted potentially 100 feet or more. Pritchett's body slammed into Green face first with tremendous force. Both crashed to the rocky floor. The impact was devastating. Pritchett sustained multiple fractures and head trauma. Green injured his arm. Both lay at the bottom of the 133-foot pit in shock. Green was in better condition than Pritchett. He understood their only hope was for him to climb out and get help. Despite his injured arm, Green prepared to ascend. He pulled himself up the rope foot by foot. The 133-foot climb took significant time and effort. When Green reached the top, he immediately contacted emergency services. hours. Specialized cave rescue teams arrived. They descended with a rescue litter. Rescuers found Pritchett conscious but in extreme pain. They stabilized her and placed her in the rescue litter. The team hauled her up 133 feet using pulleys and ropes. After a long ordeal, Pritchett emerged from the pit. She was transported to the hospital immediately. Remarkably, she survived a fall that could have easily killed her. Womer Cave Incident. On March 29, 2003, the York Grotto Cave explorers met at Womer Cave in Pennsylvania for a routine trip. Mark Engel had planned the expedition, splitting the group into two teams. Kevin Dunleavy, a 41-year-old experienced spelunker, led the second group deeper into limestone passages. They had proper equipment, backup lights, and years of experience navigating tight spaces. They reached a junction where a tight passage branched toward the back of the cave. The passage led to something called the Shoemaker Room. Dunleavy had never been down this route, but heard it was a quick 10 to 20-minute trip. The group made a fatal decision to leave their packs at the junction. All their emergency equipment, backup gear, and rescue tools stayed behind. 3 members decided to stay with the packs and wait for the others to return. Dunleavy and 3 others continued into the narrow passage. The walls immediately closed in, forcing them to crouch, then crawl. The rock formations became more complex with loose stones and unstable formations. They encountered an 18-inch high crawl space that forced them to their bellies. Above them, wedged rocks formed a makeshift ceiling of breakdown formations. The rocks were clearly not part of the original cave structure, but fallen debris. Breakdown formations are notoriously unstable and can shift without warning. One by one, the group squeezed through the crawl underneath the wedged rocks. Dunleavy had to remove his helmet to fit through the tight space. When they emerged from the crawl, they made a crushing discovery. The passage ended in a blank wall with no shoemaker room. They had risked their lives crawling under unstable rocks for nothing. Now they had to make the same dangerous journey back in reverse. As Dunleavy turned to lead back through the crawl, he saw the full horror. The breakdown formation was far more unstable than he had realized. Loose rocks were balanced precariously, creating a house of cards. Dunleavy was halfway through when physics caught up with them. A 50-pound rock, disturbed by vibrations, shifted in the breakdown above. The stone crashed down directly onto Dunleavy's upper legs, pinning him. The rock was wedged so tightly it seemed cemented in place. Dunleavy was trapped lying on his back with a boulder crushing his legs. He couldn't move forward, backward, turn around, or even sit up. The 3 group members behind him were now trapped in the dead-end passage. Their only experienced leader was injured and immobilized. The trapped team tried moving the rock, but it wouldn't budge even slightly. They needed tools to break or lift it properly, but their equipment was unreachable. All their rescue tools were sitting in packs on the other side of the crawl. The decision to leave their packs behind now seemed incredibly stupid. Dunleavy called out to the 3 members waiting at the junction. 2 immediately left to find Mark Engel and the other group for help. Sky Fisher stayed behind to try helping the trapped team. The pain was becoming unbearable as the breakdown continued to shift above. After 30 minutes, one trapped member remembered he had rope in his personal pack. Fisher was able to reach through cracks and retrieve the rope. This gave them their first real chance to engineer a solution. Working in the confined crawl was like performing surgery in a shoebox. Every movement had to be precise to avoid shifting more rocks. After several attempts, Dunleavy managed to lift the rock slightly. The others worked rope around the boulder to create better leverage. Working together, they lifted the rock just enough for Dunleavy to slide free. The moment he was clear, Dunleavy scrambled out faster than ever before. The others quickly followed, not wanting to spend another second under unstable rocks. They emerged like survivors of a mine collapse, grateful to be alive. Cueva de la Venta Cave Incident. On January 4th, 1989, 3 experienced spelunkers went to explore Cueva de la Venta in Mexico. Cynthia Van, Ray Hardcastle, and John Pint were doing a routine scouting mission. Cueva de la Venta was a massive lava tube near Tequila Volcano. The cave was famous for its 75 entrances that let in natural light. They traveled light with just one 6-volt flashlight and a weak disposable light. Since most of the cave was naturally lit, they didn't think they needed much equipment. The first part was beautiful with sunlight streaming through entrances. As they went deeper, the entrances became fewer and natural light faded. They reached a narrow section where the passage was only a foot wide at floor level. Above their heads, it opened to about 5 feet across. The cheerful sunlight was completely gone in this dark area. They squeezed into the narrow passage, moving sideways in single file. The walls pressed against their bodies in the confined space. Their flashlight began to dim as the battery died faster than expected. They were now far from the last entrance they had passed. The 6-volt flashlight flickered once, then went out completely. Complete darkness swallowed them where they couldn't see anything. John grabbed his nearly dead disposable flashlight with shaking hands. The weak beam came on, barely lighting up 3 feet ahead. That's when they saw a massive snake stretched across the narrow passage. The snake was 6 feet long, coiled up like a living roadblock. Its head was raised with tongue flicking, sensing the intruders. Cynthia accidentally stepped on it, making the snake aggressive. The snake's eyes reflected the weak light as it stared at them. A low hiss filled the narrow space as the snake opened its mouth. They could see its fangs with a striking range of at least 2 feet. In the confined passage, there was nowhere to dodge an attack. Then their last light died and absolute darkness returned. They could hear the snake moving, repositioning itself and breathing. The creature was invisible but blocking their escape route. Nobody moved or spoke as the snake's presence filled the space. Hardcastle decided to back away slowly in complete darkness. He felt his way along the wall, moving carefully to avoid alerting the snake. When he reached daylight, he found a fallen pole about 8 feet long. Going back into the darkness was terrifying as he carried the pole. Working by feel, he positioned the pole above the snake's body. The creature sensed the threat and started thrashing, trying to escape. With the pole holding the snake down, they pressed against the wall. The snake's anger was intense with constant hissing echoing through the passage. Hardcastle lifted the pole and ran as the snake's fury followed them. They stumbled and ran through the narrow passage guided by memory. They didn't stop until they reached the main tunnel and natural light. Rio Camuy Cave Incident. On November 19, 2006, 13 tourists traveled to Rio Camuy in Puerto Rico for cave exploration. Winfredo Lopez Lucis was their 34-year-old guide with professional cave certification. He had guided hundreds of groups through these caves during his career. Carlos Lopez was his teammate who helped with the rope systems. The group included 3 adults and 8 children excited for their adventure. Heavy rains had fallen the day before, making the underground river much higher than usual. They walked toward the area where the underground river emerged from deep earth. The Rio Camuy had carved channels with walls reaching 40 feet high. Winfredo's teammate had warned him the river was flowing dangerously high. This was much higher than normal and potentially dangerous for the group. They reached the edge and looked down at the river moving through the channel. Near a 6-foot waterfall was a hydraulic where water spun in deadly circles. This was a spot where objects could get trapped forever, spinning until they sank. Winfredo and Carlos began setting up their rope system with anchor points. Carlos got ready to go down first to check the river conditions safely. Safety rules demanded someone inspect the area before everyone descended. Carlos clipped his gear to the rope and started rappelling down. He moved along the ledge and stayed away from the dangerous waterfall. The hydraulic churned beneath him with more aggression than usual. Winfredo studied the setup, but something bothered him about the water sound. The hydraulic looked more aggressive with debris swirling in the current. Despite warnings about changing conditions, Winfredo decided to descend too. People above began giving him clear and urgent warnings not to go down, but Winfredo was already committed and began his descent on the rope. Someone screamed desperately at him not to go down there. Winfredo's foot slipped on wet rock that was slicker than expected. His grip on the rope shifted and suddenly he was falling instead of rappelling. Though the belay system caught him, momentum carried him toward the water. He hit the river with a splash that echoed through the channel. The current grabbed him immediately with tremendous power. The tension on the belay line yanked Carlos from his safe position. The rope connecting them became a liability instead of safety equipment. Both men disappeared behind the waterfall within seconds. Above them, tourists watched in horror as their guides vanished. Children began crying and adults shouted questions with no answers. Carlos felt the hydraulic's power as water pushed him down, then up repeatedly. The belay line connected him to Winfredo but anchored him to the hydraulic's grip. 5 times Carlos fought his way to where Winfredo struggled against the current. The first time he grabbed Winfredo's arm, but the current tore them apart. The second time he tried to lift his head above water, unsuccessfully. On the third touch, Carlos grasped Winfredo's harness, but his body felt limp. The belay line had jammed above and couldn't be released quickly enough. When the line finally came free, both men washed into calmer water downstream. Carlos managed to untie himself and drag Winfredo's body onto a rock ledge. He began CPR immediately, pressing on his chest and breathing into his lungs. But the hydraulic had held them too long, and Winfredo was gone. Emergency services were called and rescue teams mobilized quickly. The 13 tourists were evacuated first through the cave system. Their adventure ended in tragedy as they emerged shaken and silent. Winfredo's body was recovered with careful precision by the rescue team.